Welcome, everyone. You're tuned into the Private Investigator Experience. Our host is Phil Little, and I'm Wade Little. Before we get too far into today's show, we would like to ask you to subscribe, to like. If you're listening to a podcast, if you're on YouTube, whatever it may be, please hit that subscribe, that like button, and also tell your friends, tell your family about the show. We'd love to have as many viewers, listeners as possible as we develop this show and as we grow. We also have our email address, littlep7077@gmail.com. Send us any questions you might have, any thoughts on the show. Maybe you have an investigative matter that you want to talk about, or you want to see if we can help in any way. Please go ahead, send that to us, and we will respond. All right, so now on today's show, we're going to talk about a topic that we really get asked a lot about, and that is, what does a private investigator really do? Now, we're also going to talk about some of the new threats, security, and safety concerns that are out there that we're all facing today in one way or another. And also last, but definitely not least, we have a special guest on today's show. Now, I could give you his full resume, but our show isn't that long. So I will give you a tease. The guest has worked in the investigative field. He oversaw, operated a PI academy. He was a deputy DA in Los Angeles, California, and he's currently in private practice. Now, amongst many other things that our host, Phil Little, will tell you about him, I can tell you his name is Wayne and that he is my brother. So let's get into today's show. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Wade. After that, I need to get my throat clear, I think. But we do want to thank everybody for joining us today. And as we look at the life of a private investigator, and one of the things that we want to do on this show is not just pick inside some exciting cases and maybe some not so exciting, but we want to try to get your interest in research and find out what's going on around you. Remember, the first trait of a good investigator is to be a good researcher, and we want to keep prodding you in that, and hopefully you'll pick up and want to learn the facts that will help you stay safe. And remember, its knowledge is much more powerful than a physical force. Yes, today we have on my oldest son, Wayne, and he started out really young, going out with me as Wade went out some too, but Wayne, I think, started first. And he became a really good investigator as he grew up in his teen years. And so, Wayne, it's good to have you on today. And I think the story with your career started when you were like, what, 4 or 5 in a class you were in? Tell us about how all that started.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And Dad, it's great to be on here. I love what you're doing with this. And I think it's important and it's going to become even more successful because of the topics that you're addressing and how you're doing it. You're good at this stuff. So keep it up. Yeah. So the story goes, I was 4 years old or 5 years old in Sunday school. And the teacher had given a great little message on how if no one's there to help, if your mom and dad's not around, if your brother or sister's not around, grandma, grandpa not around, you can always call on Jesus. And it's a good sound message. And it was, so at the end, hoping that her message got across, she asked the class, okay, class, if no one's around, mom and dad's not around, brother, sister's not around, grandma and grandpa's not around, who are you going to call? And no one said anything. She calls on me. Even at that age, I was pretty, I guess, talkative. And she says, Wayne, who are you going to call? I said, I'd call my attorney. And the reason for that is because even at that age, I had this idea of the attorney being the kind of the knight in shining armor. And my uncle, who was, I think he was going to law school at the time, or may have just, I think he was going to law school, but it was in my mind that my, kind of my favorite uncle, because he was the closest in age and the one that kind of played with us a lot, he was going to be an attorney. And that was a really cool thing. So my sense is that from a very early age that while Jesus, God are there to help on that level, there's something about in the human condition about reaching out and helping and taking care of people. And that was throughout my family, growing up in the church, Christian grandparents and parents that were very involved in philanthropic foundation, helping people. That was a mark on my life very early on about helping people and doing. So in my mind, being an attorney was one way to do that.
I remember I've been thinking about some of those early things. In those days, this was before West Coast Detectives. I'd taken that over. I had a private agency. We also had a repo license. And I remember you were out on some of those. But what are some of the first cases that you can remember that you went out on and take out some of those experiences? Share how your introduction started.
I remember some of those repo cases, and somehow you would combine a weekend away or a holiday with a repo case. So somehow we not only had a time at the beach, but we came home with another car or something. I don't remember that, but or how that worked. But I remember one time there was a peacock yellow turbo Porsche. I guess he was hiding it out at the beach. And I remember I was excited to go to the beach, but then I became more excited trying to figure out where this car was with you as we were driving around. You were looking, you were casing the thing. I don't know who else was involved, but and then of course there was a time in Pacoima where I think it was Pacoima where you go in and I'm with you, and I don't know Wade if you were there too, but you pull out the vehicle, you call it in, everything's good, and the owner ends up coming after us and is on the truck and is trying to beat his vehicle away and is yelling all kinds of stuff, and you're driving around the tow truck and the car telling him to get off, and yeah, I remember a couple of those different occasions.
Yeah, we had a few of those. Some down in South Los Angeles were pretty touchy at the time. That the old wild west a little bit. Well, as you started being involved I'd been in law enforcement, of course, when you were younger on the San Bernardino County Sheriff's, and I've been around that. But what were you thinking about what I was doing? And then as you had an interest in it because you became very good at it, but how did that help shape your approach to life, being what you've learned as a private investigator, what you learned in the discipline and all that? How did that help you as you got up into school and decided this is what I want to do in life and legal?
There was another memory I had from that period too, and I think it kind of shaped something in me as well. Someone had stolen, you had a truck company, and someone had stolen a bunch of tools and stuff, and you put together, you were in your PI phase then, even though you hadn't gotten into the PI world. You were always a kind of a smart guy and able to learn fast, and you were already in law enforcement. So I think you managed to somehow match the tire tracks that the vehicle left to an unusual kind of tire. And somehow it led you to a residence out in Adelanto or somewhere. And I remember going out and sitting on that place with you, and you kind of mulling over, what to do. I don't remember anything else, but in my mind, it was interesting because something bad had happened. You lost a lot of tools, and this was a large trucking company. You had, I don't know, four trucks or something. And it was, and instead of wallowing in that and being upset about it, which I'm sure you were, but you went and did something about it. You started going, okay, how do we solve this? And I think, I've always had in my, I guess, toolbox, this sense of, I want to solve the puzzle. I like puzzles. I like trying to get down to the bottom of things and figure out clues. And I saw that in you. I think that's why you particularly liked PI world. But yeah, and when you ended up getting West Coast, I remember going to the office with you, and it was Stan had built up this nice little company and they were doing certain things, but you were taking it kind of another direction. And I remember just kind of being around there as you're leading these guys and they're following you. It was like the military. You were the general and you had all these guys around you. And it was a really, I think, a unique time and experience for me, just kind of being all around that when I was, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years old. I remember Mom used to pick me up from sixth grade or maybe seventh grade, and from school. And then she would go into the office and do work for you there and do things. And I, meanwhile, would kind of, I guess, pretend to do my homework. But meanwhile, I'm out looking at the things and the guys, and they had guns and they were macho guys. And, and pretty soon I convinced Ron Farmer to let me go out on a surveillance with him. And I remember I asked him to ask you because I didn't think you'd let me do it. And finally, I guess you said yes. And Ron, I don't remember, I couldn't even put into context what his age was at the time, but he probably in his 40s at the time. But I remember going out on that surveillance with him. It started at night, and I think it ended at 2 or 3 in the morning. But I remember we're driving, we're near LAX, we're right on the freeway. And I remember him all of a sudden saying, "Hey, do you see the car?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Ron, it's right there. It has the forward lights." And he goes, "Oh, well, my vision's not that great. So keep your eyes on the car for me, okay?" So I thought it was really cool that I got to be a big part of this because he wasn't seeing so good at night, and I got to keep my eyes peeled on the of the taillights.
Well, I'd like to, in a little bit, a couple things I want to dig into a little bit more on your techniques. Along your journey, I know you worked in the summertime and you spent times on weekends and different things, but you also wound up going to London as part of your education process. And I know that was an interesting experience. I know you were at Old Bailey working with a law firm, but the place you lived in, how did you rate in your career and just your life journey of taking that year that you spent between, I guess it was college and law school, I think, or somewhere around there? What was that like and how did that benefit you?
Well, and let me go back to a couple of things because I think it's streaming back to the things I learned kind of hanging out at West Coast when I was in high school and whatnot, because it did affect me later on. Number one, I was amazed at one thing that you were really strong about was going overboard for the clients. And it amazed me how easy it was to make a client happy if you just worked hard. It wasn't that you took it easy on the job. It was this, you really did your job, you applied yourself, that you can make clients happy. And I always remember that was something that you instilled, certainly in me and, in the team, about let's make the client happy. And that's not by telling the client what they want to hear necessarily, it's by doing the work. The other thing you were focused on that I've never really been good at, and I've tried, and I think about this all the time, is billing. You're always big about make sure that you keep track of your hours and you bill it. And because you recognize that you had to be a steward of the company's time, of your time, and you had to keep the lights on. And in order to do that, you had to fairly bill and do all that. And the other thing that struck me, and I think it helped me even as I went away to another country, was I remember having these little pagers. Wade, do you remember those little pagers?
Remember pagers? Yeah. Yes, I do.
And I remember wearing one of those around. I was, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 years old. And I don't know, at that time, I don't think the connotation was you're a drug dealer. But obviously, if you've got a pager on you and you're that young, you're up to something. You got something going on. And so, and this is kind of vain, and I hate to admit this. I don't think I've told anyone this ever before. But I remember Perot was working a dispatch one night, and I was going to this party, and I kind of wanted to impress people there, I guess. So I said, hey, around 9:30, just give me a page, okay? Maybe another one at 10. So silly. But I think part of it is that the fact that I was kind of in this adult world, I had this kind of job that was interesting, and that I offered something. For me, I remember doing undercover stuff, and by undercover, I remember being where we needed somebody at a location to kind of walk around or to get a better view. And as a kid in a t-shirt and whatever, just jeans, I could go places which wouldn't raise suspicions. And so that added to my sense of value. So I think that's stuff that really helped me have a sense of confidence and value. And then my first case that I really remember kind of digging into myself and having that as my own, I think Mike was on holiday that summer, and I had a chance to kind of sit in and take cases because your director of investigations was there. Something was going on. Maybe a 12-year-old girl. And I think that her uncle went to our church or something. So we somehow knew the family, but either had run away or had been kidnapped. And the reason why they thought she'd been kidnapped was she'd been hanging around this older guy. He was taking her places and whatever. So there was this obviously great concern, but it wasn't clear whether or not she was being held against her will. And I remember getting all the information we could from the family, but I asked for her friends. I said, hey, give me as many of her friends that you know that kind of hung out with her on a daily basis that have some information. And the parents had already talked to them, and they didn't know anything, or at least they didn't know anything. So I started, and I remember sometimes going into the evenings, just calling these kids, just saying, hey, I know we talked already, but you've already talked about this, but what was she like that last day you saw her? What kind of things did she say? Oh, so you know about this guy. Oh, did you ever meet him? And finally, I got one of her friends to admit that she'd been by this guy's house, that she was with them one day and they went to go pick up something and then she left. It was momentary. But she was able to describe the fact that there was a hospital nearby She remembered a hospital. She also remembered that it was across the street from a school, probably like an elementary school. It wasn't that big. She remembered that the street curved. It wasn't a straight street. There was kind of I don't remember exactly how she described it, but it was at a certain angle that was a little different. She mentioned that there was no grass in the front lawn, and it was strewn with toys. And so I asked her how far away it was, how long did it take to get there, and she gave me kind of a rough estimation. So I literally had a map. I pinpointed where she was. I kind of did a circle of kind of how many miles around that could have been. And then I looked for every hospital. I looked for every school, elementary school. And then one by one, I looked at, where the roads seemed not to be perpendicular or whatever. It seemed to be a curve of some sort. And eventually, it was near the Kaiser in Van Nuys. This guy, that's where he lived with his parents. He was like 29 or something. And so we got to the house, we staked out the house, we confirmed that's where he was, and we got the girl back. And I don't remember all the nitty-gritty details, but he had obviously been manipulating her and kind of brainwashing her to think that no one cared about her, no one, was concerned. So getting her back was a great thing. But that was something for me that was really exciting because it took a process and not giving up, but finally finding the answer to the puzzle.
Well, there's several cases, and I want to touch later, but just one thing. Tell us about your time in London, because you lived at an interesting house there. How did you wind up there in London, and how did that all go?
Yeah, so London was a great experience for me, and I recommend anyone that if you're in college or in school, or you have kids or kids, have them take some time to go to another culture and have them take some time to go away. I mean, for me, I was always kind of established where I was. I was always a leader and stuff. I was always pretty outgoing and pretty much, and I had a reputation of being kind of a good, like a good Christian guy. And it's interesting, you can get comfortable in your role. And sometimes your perception of what that role is and what other people expect of you can kind of shape, kind of what you do and who you are. But maybe that's not necessarily deep down who you are. So for me to go to London, to be away from everyone and everything. This was a program where I got to go to the LSE, London School of Economics. I got to work with a barrister and solicitor there, and I got to live with a family. I mean, now the world got to see the real Wayne, right? Because there's no expectations around me, and my parents aren't there, whatever. And I think I was 20 or 21. And I remember one time going into I'd never been in a bar. That just wasn't something that, we did. And yet, in London, there are pubs everywhere, right? And so you just go there. You go there for lunch. And so I remember going into the pub, and I remember ordering this drink. It was called Snake Bitten or something, and it was a German lager or beer of some sort. And I drank that thing, a beautiful big bottle. I remember drinking that thing, and I remember coming out of it. And I remember I called you guys. I called my mom and dad. I said, wow, I kind of feel a little funny here. This is it. So this is strange. I remember having a conversation with you guys about that. And it was my first public instance with alcohol, but it was a great time. That the family you're talking about, they live in Crystal Palace. And, the other thing I learned about traveling is that sometimes uncomfortable is good, right? Being in new situations, and it's really how you adapt to it. She lived in this house, or this family lived in this house. It was 5 stories tall. It was probably older than our country. I just remember this amazing library. But when I met her, she introduced herself. She was very nice. It was a Southern London kind of thing where it was very polite, very proper. And then she asked me, she says, Wayne, do you believe in the metaphysical? And at that time, that wasn't a term that was used a lot. And I mean, now it's pretty common, but it was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I said, well, if you mean the spirit world, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, I'm a Christian. And she just smiled. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is she going to be doing at night when I'm sleeping? Is there some sort of weird thing going on here? And it was a little spooky. And then I was on the top floor, and across from me was a boarder who had his big blonde hair, big bushy beard. Before that was cool. Wait, you're really cool with yours. But it was kind of scary. It looked like whenever I saw him, I'd see him sometimes in the morning coming out to use the bathroom, and he would never, I don't think he ever talked to me, but he looked like he was, kinds of guys you're going to see on those crime shows about, oh yeah, we kind of knew something was wrong with him. He did something. It was just really, so again, it turned out to be a great experience for me. I fell in love with Helen and her husband and son. They were great people. That house was amazing. They had books. I remember getting a first edition Paul Bunyan copy that they had there. It was unbelievable. And I was reading poetry by the Romantics, and I felt, she gave me a book I still have to this day. It was a green cloth bound edition of Lord Tennyson's, and it was the Knights of the Round Table, all those poems. And I still have one that I can recite that I used to read a lot. And I still have that book. In fact, I need to get it rebound. If anyone knows a good rebinder, let me know. But anyways, I said a lot. The thing was, I learned there that being uncomfortable is not bad. In fact, being uncomfortable can lead to great things in life if you let yourself lean into it.
Right. So being uncomfortable, and you talked about your spiritual beliefs and her question of the metaphysical. So with being uncomfortable, didn't you do a missions trip at some point to another country?
Yeah, actually I did. And that was, I think that was either right before law school or that first summer that I took, I signed up for a trip, a mission with Youth with a Mission, YWAM. It had always been something very intertwined with my life because my parents were very involved with one of the early foundations of YWAM, Joey Dawson, and they were very active in our church. And so I would do things with them occasionally. And I love their spirit. I love the fact of, I've always thought of YWAM as kind of being like the Marines or SEAL Team 6 of the military. They just go into places and they're on their own. They're trying to figure it out. And they're just trying to love people so they would know God.
What country did you go to?
So we went around the world. So started out, we flew over from LA to Amsterdam, actually. And we're in the Netherlands for a bit. And in fact, in the Netherlands, we met one of a representative from Brother, who's the guy that did the Bible stuff?
Brother Andrew.
Brother Andrew. We met one of his reps and they loaded us up with Bibles. And so there we went to Germany. At that time, this will kind of age me a little bit here, but at that time, the wall was still standing. And it was that summer that the wall came down, 1988. And so we got to be in Berlin, in West Berlin, during that time where all this kind of exciting stuff is going on. We went into East Berlin, which was then really East Berlin. It was like if you're in a movie theater and one theater is showing black and white and one theater is showing color. The color was West Berlin. The black and white was East Berlin. I mean, that's why, too, you could see that certain countries have a spiritual covering, or there's a spirit that permeates, not just in people's hearts. So from there, we went to Poland, had some great experiences in Poland, other stories I can tell you. We ended up in Moscow. And so in Moscow, we brought a good number of these Bibles. And again, this was before Perestroika. This was just right when that whole thing was starting to happen, Glasnost, but it was still very tight. And there were, I think, 12 or 13 of us. And as we're going through customs, and part of going back to the PI thing, I think part of the deal was I always felt like a leader or somebody that had to kind of be there to help people. And so while the leader of the group, who was probably, she was in her late 20s, I guess, she went out when she went through customs to go to where this bus was. It was supposed to take us to the hotel, but I stayed back and I wanted to watch and make sure that everyone was okay, that they got out okay. And so everyone's getting out okay. We're smuggling our Bibles through. We'd been told kind of a little way to do that at the time to avoid detection. The last guy to come through was a kid who was also our worship guy who played guitar. And in his guitar case, he had stacked all of his Bibles. Well, they looked at him, and because he was of a different nationality, that threw them. That wasn't something they were used to seeing. If you're American, you hang out with Americans. If you're Asian, whatever. And so she decided she was going to look a little closely at his stuff. So when she opened up the case, she sees these Bibles, and she immediately looks out at where everyone else went. She was like, she starts to put her hand up, and I came in and immediately just got in front of her. I said, "Oh, excuse me, is there a problem? We're bringing these as gifts for the 1,000 year of Christianity in Russia. It's our gift. We like to bring gifts, and this is our gift. Would you like some?" And she was just flustered. I just remember the poor lady was just flustered. She pushed a button or something, and then these two guys come down, And one guy who I was kind of talking to, he had a smile. He knew what was going on. And part of the deal is that they would actually confiscate the Bibles, and supposedly they would sell them and do stuff with them. But this was a no-no. They're supposed to deny entry. They're supposed to take their. But he was really cool. They asked where the others were. They wanted to search. I said, listen, I don't know. I think they already went. I don't, do you see them? I don't see them. I don't know where they are. I don't even know where I'm going. I got to figure, I got to wait for someone to tell me where. I don't know. I don't know anything. I'm just here. This is my friend. And so after a bunch of that, they ended up letting us go. I think they kept his passport. They obviously kept those Bibles, but we had enough Bibles where we ended up, Benny, myself, and this cute 20-year-old girl from the South. And I say that only because we got selected to go deliver these Bibles. And I remember she wore this colorful shirt, and she had this kind of Georgia peach kind of face to her, very cute, and this hair back. And Benny is Hispanic, and I'm the white guy. We go out, we take a subway. I have no idea how we got to where we were supposed to go. I've tried to actually call Benny and see if he remembers, but I don't know how in the world we got to this suburb where when we got outside of the train, all these buildings looked the same. It looked like projects. All these apartment buildings were exactly the same. And I remember getting out on the street and finally walking and finding someone and asking, do you know where this address is? Do you know where this address? The guy that we're delivering Bibles to that's against the law and can get him sent to Siberia. Do you know where this address is? And finally, somehow we make it. We knock on the door. A woman answers, and it is a small little flat, maybe 3 rooms, and I could see straight through. And as we walk in, I see this gentleman. He's lying down on this kind of bed, this little bed thing. And he gets up, he's tall, and he has this white hair. And as he's standing there, he reminded me of the statues that you see all throughout that part of the world of the people that they admire, Lenin, Stalin, all these guys. And he just looked like a hero. And he told us his story, how he'd been a key player in that underground church area, how he'd been sent to Siberia as punishment because they thought he was working for the CIA, how his sister would call him at night sometimes and say, I think they're going to raid you tomorrow, hide the Bibles. He would hide the Bibles and they would come the next day. This is a guy that you could just see, he reeked of this sense of knowing God and having his life depend upon every moment. And what was interesting though to me, I've thought about this a lot, about how society conditions us. At the end, he looked at us. He looked at me and Benny. He looked at me, this white kid. He looked at Benny, Hispanic kid. And he says, you two are friends? I said, yeah, of course. Benny's my boy. Benny, yeah, we're brothers in Christ. We love you. And he goes, oh, interesting. I thought in America, you two don't talk. You don't like each other. And what struck me was, here's a man who knew that he was being sold propaganda on the airwaves, who knew his government was obviously lying about things. And yet, because he was inundated with messages about America being fraught with all kinds of race riots and all kinds of problems, that in his mind, that had developed. And so I think we need to be careful about what we allow society to put on us. And so from Moscow, we went down to India. We were in Thailand. We smuggled Bibles into China. That's another story. I feel like I've talked too much as it is, but ended up in Korea, which was their year to have the Olympics. So it was an amazing trip.
Well, we could talk actually for hours, no problem about cases. But there's one I will never forget. That was a classic. I think you were in your teens, and it was a surveillance you were on in Los Angeles. And this was before, obviously, 9/11 and all the airport days. And that was quite a journey, how techniques that you used that my old law enforcement guys would have said, okay, it's over, we lost them. Give us a short journey on that case, how you wound up in Vegas and what happened.
No, and I got to give a shout out to my partner at the time, Ollie, who was living with us. So this would have been, I don't know, first year college, second year college. And I would drag him to cases. I remember once dragging him under surveillance because I like surveillances. Surveillances were like a puzzle to me. You had to look ahead. You had to be aware. You had to make turns. You had to try to position yourself so you wouldn't be found. It was like a chess game to a certain degree. And I remember one time we were following this guy, in Koreatown. He was Asian. He had a BMW, the 750, whatever the large BMW was at the time. And I remember at one point he goes to downtown LA and he gets in somehow in front of us, and I can't make the turn he made. So I yelled at Ollie, who was a tracks guy and basketball player in high school. I said, Ollie, get out and follow him. And he looks at me like, what? I said, get out and just run, follow him. And so I scream ahead. That car turns, Ollie's running after him. I scream ahead to the next block. I make a right. I make another right. I come spinning around. I see the car go by me, and I immediately turn, and I did some sort of U-turn, and I said, 5, 4, 3, 2, because I knew I had to follow the guy, but I also had to wait but I couldn't wait forever. So I was hoping within 5 seconds, Ollie was going to come. So I had the door open. Ollie comes, he runs in, he gets in the seat, and we take off and follow the guy. But the case you're talking about, I remember getting up early in the morning. We had to get up early because this guy, supposedly he was stealing from his business, and his wife, who was a partner in the business, was concerned because all this money is missing. She felt like she was going to be dumped any time. And so the thought was that he had a family or a girlfriend and maybe even another family out near the Palm Springs area or somewhere where it was going to be quite a drive. He was going to leave early in the morning. So I wake Ollie up early. We get in the car, we sit in the house, we follow him, and he's going down the 405, and we're thinking, okay, he's going to go east at some point, but he keeps going down the 405. And then he gets to LAX. I thought, wow, there aren't any flights to Palm Springs. I wonder where he's going. Well, again, Ollie and I had been prepared to stay overnight. So we did have like I don't remember what it was, a change of clothes. I don't know what we had, but I think we had something. And back in those days, PSA had these little ticket things that you could write up on the spot. They were like, I don't know, they're prepaid or like a credit card. And I remember he goes in, and I remember we were 2 people behind him as he gets to the counter. And we're able to overhear that he says Vegas. And I don't know if we assumed the next flight, or that we heard the flight number, but I look over at Ollie, hey, we're going to Vegas. So we get in, we get our 2 tickets. And I remember trying to figure it out because now this has kind of changed the whole game. I mean, now I got to contact the office. I got to make plans for things. I got to figure out where we're going to stay. What are we going to do there? Am I going to have a vehicle? And I remember Ollie and I are in the terminal. We followed him up to his gate, so we know where he's at. And we're walking behind him. And I'm saying to Ollie, okay, Ollie, here's the deal. Oh, yeah, because we checked a bag. For some reason, we checked a bag, which was silly. But I said, Ollie, when we land, he and I are talking just like this. You've got to track the bag. I'll follow him. And I'll pick you up later when I figure out what the lay of the land is. But you may be at the airport for a while. Well, as I'm saying this, he turns. He just turns and looks directly back at us. And he's, I don't know, 50 feet away. I mean, he couldn't hear us, but he just turns and looks at us. And immediately, the seasoned pro, the guys that Ollie and I are, just look natural and don't do anything. We immediately both kind of went like this, like just stopped and kind of looked up and oh, nothing going on here, nothing suspicious. And he looked at us. I remember one point at one point I'm calling the office. Yeah, and this was just before this. I think this is why he looked back at us. I'm on the phone calling the office, and he comes to the phone right next to me, the payphone right next to me. This is before cell phones. And so all this stuff is happening. We get on the plane. He is literally 2 rows in front of us on the aisle, catacorder, so he can look back and see us. Like now he's seen all this stuff. So we land in Vegas. Again, say, Ollie, okay, Ollie, man, your job is to get that bag. I'm going to try to track him. We're going to try to figure out what's going on. So we follow him out. Oh, you know what? Maybe this is where he did the turn. Actually, I think this is where he did the turn to look at us. But so we had to stop. We did he gets into a cab. As soon as he goes out the door, I run to just look at the door. I don't want to go out the door, but I run to look past, and I could see as he's getting in this cab, he's looking back. And the cab goes around, and as it makes its turn out of the thing, I can see the number in the cab, 4371, whatever that is. So I go, crap, and it's obvious I can't even go outside because he's literally looking out his window. But I got 4371. So I wait there. I wait. Finally, 4371, same cab. Oh man, I'm so glad you're here. I don't know how this happened, and this is crazy, but the guy you just picked up, I was supposed to go where he's at, and he didn't give me the right address. And I was running after him. I saw him get in your cab. If you can just let me know where he's at, if you could take me there, that'd be awesome, because I'm supposed to meet him. We got this thing we're doing, this project here in Vegas, and the guy said, "No," I said he's about 6'3". He's wearing a black shirt, black pants. He has dark hair. He was just in your cab. And the guy said, "That doesn't sound familiar. That doesn't sound, a Brooklyn accent, something. No, that didn't sound familiar." And then so I took out some money. It was, I don't know, $40 or something, which seemed like a lot to me at the time. I said, "Wait, are you sure?" I mean, he had black hair, black shirt, black. Oh, the black hair, black shirt, black pants. Yeah, come on in. I'll take you right where he's at. So we get in, and he takes us to this apartment complex. And sure enough, he's got a woman there. He's got kid there. And funny enough, I was so excited about the fact that I got to jump in a cab and say, "Follow that cab," type of thing. I was excited about this whole dynamic that I left my camera in there. And this guy was honest enough to return it, maybe because he realized I knew his number, but that was a lot of fun. And that whole weekend was kind of crazy.
Well, I remember that, Wayne, was you thought on your feet. A lot of old timers would have said, "Oh, okay, we've lost him. Call in. Hey, guys, we've lost him. We don't know where he went to." But that was the techniques you learned, and you did well at it. But hey, this could go on all day. But I know life's got to go on for people. But it's exciting, guys. Having a family in the PI business, you can have some fun, but you can also learn a lot of things. And so we've been looking down this, Wade. So why don't you take us from here?
Well, I will do that. And those were some great stories. And that's one thing, Wayne, you've always been good at is talking and communicating and sharing. So that was fun. Made me think of a lot of things as well. But anyway, as we start to wind up, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for listening, for watching wherever you're at and however you are tuned into us. We do appreciate it. And this is just a reminder again that if you haven't already, hit the subscribe and the like buttons. Whatever buttons are there, go ahead and hit them. Tell your friends, tell your family about us. And we're really trying to develop and grow this show. And we need your help. You are an important part of this show as our audience. So thank you for that. Also want to remind you of our email address. We have that at plittlepi777@gmail.com. Dad, one more question. Do you have any final thoughts for us today?
Well, yes, I do. I just want God to bless each one of our viewers and listeners and their families, and may God bless America.